Hello, this is Monty Perrin with Outdoor Fathers. 20-some years ago, actually 22 years ago I guess it is now, I went out for my first day of turkey hunting and had success. And the reason I had success is I had the good fortune of being able to go with somebody who knew what they were doing. They put me in a good situation. I got to do the calling myself. They just kind of put me in the right spot and took off. And the only thing I really could do at the time was yelp, but I found out that day that to start with that was enough. And so, but shortly thereafter I went out on my first day by myself and I didn't know what to do. So I called my friend and he gave me a little coaching, and basically I could still only yelp. So that's what I went out and did. What I've learned is that if a person can learn how to do a good yelp, then they can add other things to their calling techniques and start having some success and maybe turn some hunts that they weren't going to be able to get the job done without those particular calls. So what I want to do real quick is show you how to do a good yelp on some really simple calls. They're not going to be mouth calls necessarily, but I'm going to show you how to make an effective yelp, and that way you can go out there and get started, and then you start having some experience, and that experience will become wisdom because it's knowledge that you have that you know works because it was something that you did yourself. One of the simplest ways you can make a yelp is with a push call like this. It's real simple. I've owned several of them. I've narrowed this down to my favorite, but here's all you got to do to make a good yelp with this. Now, I've actually killed turkeys with exactly this call right here. The reason I pulled this out to start with is because I want to make a point here. If you look in the inside of this thing and see the way it's made, it's got a little striker in the bottom of it, and this and the scratching surface is on the bottom of this board here, and you put chalk on it. Well, it never comes off that striker, and that's where a lot of people, one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they're using a slate call or any kind of a friction call, is they start trying to take their, they do it like this. Now I'm exaggerating that, but I've seen a whole lot of that. And what I want you to understand is I had the good fortune of when I first started in the first couple of years, I met somebody who was really good at running a slate call, and they showed me a couple techniques that I'm going to share with you now that basically put me in a situation where I can make more realistic calls. If you look at this call, when you go that direction, you make very little if any noise. The other way it makes noise. Now, so instead of lifting it off the surface and doing that, do it like this. If you want to cluck with it, it's just pop. Never comes off the surface. Make a yelp. I actually go to my son's school every year and do this little presentation with my calls around Thanksgiving. And I take calls with me that I don't mind if the kids tear up. They'll take those calls and I'll show them how to run them, and I do what I just did with you guys. Show one way it doesn't make a sound, the other way it does. And you'd be amazed at how realistic those, less than third graders can make their calls sound. So if you learn how to make that good yelp, then you just start out in the morning, you get a turkey gobbling and get them to answer. Just don't overdo it. You'll probably have good success. The next thing that I added to my toolbox that actually turned some hunts for me was a fighting purr. I happened to start hunting about the time that Night and Hell came out with this call called a fighting purr system. And at the time I owned two of them. They were made out of plastic. I still got one in the house. But I can do it with this. It goes like this. And that's a sound that turkeys make when they're fighting. And that's a natural thing for them. Even turkeys that like each other will fight. I've had turkeys that I've been able to witness quite a bit the last little bit here lately because they're coming in a situation where I can see them quite a bit. And those turkeys make that sound sometimes, okay? And even, they're all buddies, but they're still trying to find their pecking order and they're making that sound. The first time I ever used that call, I was in a situation where I'd only been hunting for 2 or 3 years. I'd been talking to a bird for 2.5 hours, and this was my Hail Mary. I had a wing feather with me, and I handed it to the fellow with me, and I said, "Have you ever seen a rooster fight on TV or something like that?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Can you simulate that sound that they make when they're jumping up and trying to flog each other with this wing?" He says, "I'll try." I said, "I'm going to get these push pin calls, and when I start that sound, you start doing that." Well, while we're doing that, I'm going, and he goes, I'm thinking, oh man, this sounds so realistic. As soon as I stopped, he stopped. Less than 2 minutes later, that turkey who we'd been talking to for no less than 2.5 hours flew in and got to within range. It was an awesome, awesome, awesome hunt. I got in another situation like that where I was calling a bird for a fella. It came in, it got to about 60 yards, came in from about 10 o'clock, skirted out in front of us, and was leaving at 2 o'clock. And it never got in within range, and I said, I've got to do something. So I started doing, at that time I used a mouth call, and I started doing that same fighting purr. That same turkey stayed in his strut, turned around, and just kept inching closer to us. I'd do it a little bit more and he'd inch closer to us. I'd do it a little bit more and he'd inch closer to us. I got in another situation where I was in a field in a tent bow hunting, and I had a hen with a beard come in. And I got on her at full draw, and as soon as I got to full draw, she's 15 steps away. I said, I never had taken a turkey with a bow. I said, I don't want to shoot her. She lays eggs. At that time, you know, we were trying to really get our birds going at that time. And I said, I don't want to do that. I let off, and I just barely let off, and I looked the way she had come, and there was 3 gobblers that just stepped into that field. And I was out about 100 yards in the middle of that field in a tent. And I said, well, there's all 3 of them together. They must tolerate each other. So I had a mouth call in. I said, and they literally ran over to me. One more time, I actually had the opportunity to take a friend of mine, the fellow that got me started, the fellow that put me in that good place that first day. We went to Nebraska, and while we're listening to turkeys gobble down in the creek bottom here off to our left at about 10 o'clock, there's more turkeys out here about 2 o'clock. And we can see them across the prairie. We can't see the ones that are over here making all the fuss, but we can look up there and see them. And I started doing my yelping and that type of thing, and they'd look our way and just kept going toward the turkeys that were down here making all the noise. I said, well, I got to try something. I started doing that fighting purr. Them turkeys turned, stayed in their strut, and came 200 yards right to us. I was able to let them walk past me, and my friend got a shot. As soon as that happened, I started doing with my mouth call again. And as soon as I did that, another turkey came back and started flogging that one that was on the ground flopping, and we both hooked up right there. The cool thing about it was I got my mentor, the man who got me started, looked at me and said, what was that call you were making? I said, that's a fighting purr. And he says, I've got to learn how to make it. So if you'll add that to your repertoire, you can do it with a mouth call, or you can do it with just what I did just here. I'll show you how to do it on a slate. Now, there's one more call that I've used that has made a difference, and that's just a plain and simple purr. And the way I've used that is when I get turkeys in close, let's say I know they're only 75, 100 yards because of the foliage, I can't see them, or maybe I can see them, they're at 75, 100 yards. If I can just do, I have a couple other calls that I'll do it on that are a little more subtle. You can even do it, you can also do it with a diaphragm, with a mouth call, and that was probably the most difficult for me to get. The most important thing you got to do is have a call that can actually make that sound, because a lot of times you get calls that make good cuts, and they don't have, I call it the sweetness to do those less vibratory sounds like a purr or a kiki. This particular one will, and it goes like this. If you practice, I'm not going to try to tell you how to do it. I just did this ruffles have ridges thing till I finally got a purr sound out of it. But if you do, the good thing about doing this one is you're talking about being in a situation where you're trying to close the deal. And if the turkey's in close, you might not be in a situation where you can work a slate call, but you got this in your mouth. Now, while I'm on calls, let me just say this. I've probably bought 500 of those type calls right there. Here's the challenge with them. You can't take them back. You just had them in your mouth. And you'll get one and it'll sound just like the last one you bought, or you get one and it won't do what you want it to do, or you'll get one and even if you're a proficient call, it doesn't have the versatility that you want in a call. I bought this call and nothing but this for the last 4 or 5 years. It's made by Woodhaven. I don't even know what it's called, but it's the orange one with the little round cut in the center of it. Here's why I like this particular call. They're not paying me a dime for this. What I'm trying to do is help people who are starting out save some money, because I bought call makers. I literally have bought over 500 of these type calls. I've bought half a dozen in the last 5 years after I found this one. Here's why I like this one, because it'll do this. I don't know why us turkey hunters put our hand over our mouth. Somebody might need to tell me that, but that is a realistic yelp to me. It's high pitched enough, but it still has some rasp in it. I know a lot of people play a turkey call and it sounds real sweet. And there are a few turkeys out there that sound that way, but most turkeys I've ever heard, they sound more like the lady who's been smoking all her life and has a raspy voice. That's the way most hens that I've personally heard in the woods sound. But at the same time, you get a call a lot of times that'll make that sound for you, but it won't do this. Even if you know how to make the sound, you can't get that sweet high-pitched purr out, and you certainly can't get this kiki out. Hear that kiki, how it rolls over into that realistic raspy yelp? I can also gobble on this call a little bit, enough to make a turkey maybe think there's a gobbler with another hen. That sounds realistic for me. But that's a realistic sounding yelp. It'll do a good cackle. It'll do everything I want a mouth call to do and do it realistically. And to be honest with you, I just think it makes up for a whole lot of, maybe not skill, just the ability to blow a call that makes a good sound. If you will keep this in mind when you're starting out, if you learn how to do a yelp, just learn how to do it with something as simple as this. Or a slate call. It's got that same rasp in it. Another thing you want to do when you condition a slate call is create a grain. Go sideways so that you have something to drag across, like so, okay? If you learn how to make some realistic yelps, you do it with a box call, it's the same thing. You never lift the paddle off the call. You just leave it on there. And if you'll just learn how to do that call right there, and then practice some of this other stuff that I've been sharing with you, like maybe learn how to do a fighting purr, learn how to do just a regular purr, a sweet purr, maybe learn how to do a gobble. They're all tricks that you can put into your tool bag, and once you've got those tricks, you can try them, and then you're going to learn from personal experience, which once you've experienced, in my opinion, it's wisdom. When you have that wisdom, you know what to do and when to do it. What I want to do is empower you to become a turkey hunter that can enjoy their days in the woods more and more. This is Monty Perrin with Outdoor Fathers. Get outdoors.